Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into a world where smiles were not just smiles. And where you, of all people, have somehow stumbled right into an Etruscan workshop glowing with lamplight and the faint scent of heated metal. You hear the gentle scrape of tools against ivory. And you watch a craftsman, calm, steady, and way too comfortable holding someone's extracted molar, shape what will eventually become one of the most elaborate sets of false teeth in ancient history. It's warm, a little smoky, and honestly, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here without begging for modern dentistry. You'd tap out the moment they suggested using linen threads and molten gold near your gums. You really would. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love knowing how far these sleepy journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a slow breath as you watch the flicker of the oil lamp dance across the craftsman's hands. He's humming something, an old folk tune. Probably, but it's drowned beneath the quiet clinking of tiny gold strips being shaped into connectors. The room feels close and warm, filled with the earthy smell of clay jars and beeswax polish. As you stand there, half curious and half questioning your life choices, a woman steps in. She's wrapped in a deep burgundy cloak, the kind you've only seen in museum cases. She opens her mouth slightly, revealing a gap where 2 teeth used to be. She's here for the newest fashion trend of the 7th century BCE, beautifully crafted false teeth. The Etruscan signature. You watch as the craftsman lifts a tray lined with pieces of gold, tiny carved slivers of ivory, and actual human teeth. Yes, actual teeth. It's like Etsy meets a horror movie. But somehow, elegant. The Etruscans didn't just patch things up, they beautified them. To them, a bright, even smile wasn't vanity, it was a declaration. A way to walk into a temple or a banquet and silently say, "I matter here." And honestly, you can feel that energy simmering under the surface. There's something almost soothing about the methodical pace of the workshop. The craftsman takes measurements with a thin bronze tool, mutters something about proportions, and begins binding a thin strip of gold around the teeth. It looks delicate, like jewelry, and it dawns on you that this is exactly what it is. The Etruscans didn't separate dentistry from art, in their minds. The two lived in the same breath. The same hands that carved pendants and bracelets carved these smiles. As you observe, you realize something odd. No one flinches at the idea of replacing missing teeth with pieces taken from someone else. In this world, it's completely normal, maybe a little unsettling for you, but normal here. One of the not-so-well-known facts is that some Etruscan families kept boxes of spare teeth. Almost like keeping spare buttons for a coat. Historians still debate whether these teeth came mostly from deceased relatives, traded goods, or, let's just say, less peaceful methods. You drift a bit closer. And that's when you catch the craftsman whispering a tiny prayer under his breath, a ritual for steady hands. He's not praying to avoid dental malpractice lawsuits, he's praying to Tenia, the sky god, asking for precision and favor. You can almost feel the quiet reverence in the room as he aligns the gold band perfectly. weaving it through drilled holes in the ivory piece. This is their origin story, the birth of the Etruscan smile. Crafted in firelight and devotion. Outside, you hear distant chatter, street vendors closing stalls, kids running home, someone arguing about the price of figs. Life hums beyond these clay walls. But here, in this little room, the world narrows down to the soft breath of the customer, the glimmer of gold, and the slow, steady shaping of identity. You sense that this isn't just about teeth, it's about belonging, status, and the quiet wish to be seen. And as you linger in that dim glow, watching the first glint of a future smile take form, the story begins to pull you deeper, gently, calmly, like sinking into a warm bed of history. You're still standing in that warm little workshop. And as the woman in the burgundy cloak steps out with her soon-to-be perfected smile, another figure shuffles in, an elderly man with a narrow face, sharp eyes, and fingers stained permanently gold. He looks at you like you're lost. Which, honestly, you are, but he says nothing. Instead, he motions you closer, as if you're an apprentice he forgot he hired. The lamplight glints off his tools, tiny chisels, coils of fine wire, polished bone plates, and you realize you're watching something unusual. A person who is simultaneously a jeweler, a sculptor, a healer, and a dentist, centuries before dentistry becomes a proper profession. He sets out a collection of miniature hammers, each one wrapped in soft leather to keep from cracking delicate ivory. The tools look like they belong in a goldsmith's studio, not a medical space. But that's the thing. You're learning that Etruscan dental work was jewelry work. There was no divide, no clinical sterility, no shiny silver trays. The creation of false teeth was considered an extension of fine craftsmanship, a respectable and even prestigious trade. You watch as he sorts through fragments of ivory, each piece sanded until smooth as a river pebble. He hums under his breath, tapping and testing, searching for the perfect match to a missing incisor. He doesn't even glance at the woman's original tooth. She didn't keep it, apparently, so he's improvising. It's a little like custom car work, but for your mouth. He picks up a tiny gold strip, thin as a thread but gleaming like sunrise over the Tuscan hills. The gold isn't just decoration. It's structure, it's stability, and it's the secret to why Etruscan false teeth survived long enough for you and modern archaeologists to marvel at them. You notice how gentle he is when he bends the metal, slow, deliberate movements, almost like he's coaxing the gold instead of forcing it. As he works, the old man starts talking, not to you directly, but to the empty room, as if narrating his own memories. He recalls apprenticeships that began in childhood, when boys were taught to shape metal before they even learned to write. Girls too, sometimes, though no one admits that openly. He mentions how the finest tooth makers were often also the town's jewelers, and how customers would come in for earrings and leave with an appointment for cosmetic dental work. You notice something else. The designs are sophisticated. These craftsmen weren't just copying nature, they were improving it. A little extra brightness here, a smoother curve there. Maybe that molar didn't look so good in real life. So why not give the client a better version? Etruscan beauty standards were flexible, but status was not. A well-shaped smile said wealth. A gold-reinforced smile said prestige. And a smile with carved ivory, well, that said you had connections or an inheritance worth bragging about. As the old man continues shaping his masterpiece, you catch a strange detail he mutters. Some craftsmen intentionally left tiny decorative marks on the gold bands, secret signatures. Not for ego, but for lineage. Historians still debate whether these marks represented family workshops, religious symbols, or simply artistic flair. But you see the way his eyes shine when he finishes carving one. This is pride. Pure and simple. A jeweler's ego disguised in a dentist's task. He pauses to sip something from a clay cup, probably watered wine, and offers you a small grin. You notice his own teeth, a mix of worn originals and one golden fixture gleaming proudly. It's a quiet confirmation that these craftsmen trusted their own art. And honestly, it suits him. The little glint matches his personality, which is somewhere between wisdom and mild impatience. Like a grandfather who loves you but wishes you'd stop touching everything on his workbench. A young apprentice slips in through the doorway, carrying a basket of tools that jingle softly. The boy bows his head, clearly intimidated, and hands over a new batch of gold. You watch as the old craftsman inspects it with ruthless precision. He shakes his head, muttering about impurities, trade routes, and unreliable merchants from across the sea. The apprentice shrinks a little. You resist the urge to pat him on the shoulder. Then the craftsman says something that makes you pause. Gold tells the truth better than people do. You feel the weight of that line. It's poetic, a little dramatic, and very on brand for someone who spends his life shaping smiles the way others shape destinies. And as he threads a thin band of gold through the ivory, you notice how steady his hands remain despite his age. This isn't just skill, it's ritual. It's a lifetime of shaping identity one tiny shimmer at a time. You sense how important these artisans were, trusted, respected, and sometimes even feared. They handled parts of the body others refused to touch. And they understood the public face, literally, of society. The night air cools outside while lamplight warms the workshop. You feel lulled by the rhythm, tap, scrape, twist, polish, and slowly, you settle deeper into the scene, realizing that you're not just watching a craftsman, you're witnessing the birth of an ancient profession. Built on gold, ivory, and endless patience, you follow the old craftsman out into the soft evening air. And the moment you step beyond the workshop doorway, the world of the Etruscans expands around you like a warm breath. Clay houses glow with lamplight. Streets hum with the low murmur of conversations. And you catch the unmistakable sound of laughter rolling from a nearby courtyard, bright, confident, almost theatrical. It takes only a few seconds for you to realize why. Every person you see is obsessed with their smile. Not in a modern, whiten your teeth in 5 minutes kind of way, but in a deep, cultural, borderline spiritual manner. Here, a smile isn't just a gesture, it's a badge of honor. A symbol of status, almost like wearing a luxury watch today, but on your face. As you wander, you watch a young merchant lean casually against a column, flashing a grin that reveals 2 perfectly sculpted ivory incisors set in gleaming gold bands. They're bright enough to catch the lamplight and throw it back at you. He's absolutely showing off, and in this world, that's entirely normal. The Etruscans believed that the mouth, teeth especially, held the power of presence. A confident smile announced wealth, lineage, and favor from the gods. You can almost hear the merchant thinking, "Yes, these are expensive. Thank you for noticing." You pass a group of women gathered near a fountain, each one speaking with expressive gestures. Their laughter is melodic, a little dramatic, and full of deliberate moments where they tilt their heads just so, letting their false teeth catch the glow of the water's reflection. One woman even lowers her voice to tell a friend that her husband is saving up for a full upper set. The way someone today might brag about booking a luxury vacation. The friend gasps, impressed. You try not to laugh because honestly, the priorities here feel weirdly familiar. There's a reason behind all this, though, and you sense it the longer you watch people pass by. The Etruscans valued beauty not as vanity but as harmony, balance in the body, symmetry in the face, and teeth, being the literal gateway to speech and expression, were seen as the anchor of that harmony. So when someone's tooth fell out, which happened often thanks to their sugary wine and gritty bread, it wasn't merely a cosmetic problem. It was a spiritual disruption, something that needed fixing as quickly as possible. You find yourself lingering near a small shrine dedicated to Turin, the goddess of beauty and vitality. Offerings of flowers, combs, polished stones, and yes, tiny gold trinkets, are arranged lovingly at her feet. A woman kneels beside you, whispering a prayer you can barely hear, asking for charm, confidence, and the courage to smile fully during an upcoming festival. It hits you then, for the Etruscans, beauty was strength. A smile could open doors, earn alliances, charm lovers, and affirm one's very place in society. As you watch people drift by in the cool night air, you notice something else. Not everyone can afford elaborate false teeth. Some wear simple repairs, small bone pieces or wooden filler slivers dyed to match enamel. Others hide their mouths when speaking. A teenage boy pulls his cloak slightly higher whenever he laughs. The contrast is subtle but telling. Beauty here is accessible, but excellence? Excellence costs. You pause near an older man seated on a stone bench. His hair silver, his posture dignified. When he notices your presence, he gives you a polite smile, warm, kind, and unmistakably incomplete. A single gold band holds his remaining front teeth together, and the others are long gone. You feel a pang of tenderness as his eyes crinkle. He doesn't hide his smile, he offers it freely. And that's when you realize another truth. While the elite sharpened their status with gold, everyday people saw smiles as stories, not trophies. Still, you can't help but marvel at the cultural intensity of it all. The Etruscans didn't just care about looks, they built social structure around them. Historians still debate whether this obsession stemmed from religious teachings, trade influences, or simple cultural preference, but you, standing here in the lamplit streets, can feel it in your bones. The Etruscans believed a smile revealed the soul. As you drift toward the end of the street, a group of children runs past, laughing uncontrollably after someone slips on a fig. One boy stops, looks at you, and beams proudly, revealing a tiny gold-capped tooth. He has no idea you're from the future. He just wants you to see it. And honestly, it's adorable. You keep walking, hearing the clatter of dinner dishes, the murmur of prayers, the clink of jewelry, and you feel it all stitching together into one understanding. In this world, beauty isn't frivolous. It's identity, power, protection, and expression. And for the Etruscans, no part of the body declared those things louder than the gleam of a well-crafted smile. You wake the next morning to the soft glow of sunlight spilling across an Etruscan courtyard. And before you can even stretch, you hear the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of metal on bone. It guides you like a gentle drumbeat down a narrow alley, past baskets of olives and freshly baked flatbread, until you arrive at yet another workshop, this one larger, busier, and filled with the unmistakable scent of heated gold. Today, you're getting closer to the heart of the craft. The delicate technique of fastening false teeth using thin golden bands wrapped around the wearer's natural ones. And yes, it's exactly as wild as it sounds. The moment you step inside, you see a young woman sitting patiently on a wooden stool. Her posture is steady, her chin slightly lifted, and her eyes fixed on a spot above the artisan's head, as if pretending she's somewhere far more comfortable. The craftsman, dressed in a simple linen tunic, leans in with the focus of someone mounting precious gems onto a ceremonial crown. In a way, he's preparing to attach a gold-supported false tooth to a small gap in her front row. And you can practically feel your own gums retreating in sympathy. He begins by carefully threading a narrow strip of gold behind her natural teeth. Using a slender hooked tool that looks suspiciously like something you'd find in a fishing kit. The band glimmers as he manipulates it, soft enough to bend, strong enough to hold. The method is simple but ingenious. The gold band forms a loop around healthy teeth, then secures the carved replacement tooth in place like a tiny anchor. No glue, no screws, no modern adhesives, just friction, tension, and an impressive amount of courage from the patient. The woman winces slightly as he adjusts the band. He murmurs reassurance, though it's hard to tell whether it helps. You catch yourself thinking, yeah, you definitely wouldn't survive this. And then you remember what people ate here: bread filled with grit from ancient millstones, wine flavored with honey and herbs, and occasional fruit that could crack a weak tooth clean in half. Honestly, this golden band method was probably the least terrifying part of ancient dentistry. You lean closer, fascinated by the precision of the technique. It feels like watching someone tie an impossibly delicate knot while performing surgery, all without anesthesia. The craftsman works calmly, smoothing the gold with a bone burnisher, then testing the stability with a gentle tap. You expect something to wobble, but surprisingly, nothing does. The tooth sits perfectly aligned, gleaming subtly each time the woman exhales. As if reading your thoughts, the craftsman explains to his apprentice that gold wasn't used just because it looked good. Gold is soft, malleable, and resistant to corrosion. Ivory can crack or stain. Bone can weaken. But gold? Gold stands the test of time. That's why archaeologists today still find Etruscan dental work in almost pristine condition while everything else has crumbled into dust. The apprentice nods, though his eyes are wide with awe, like he's watching magic instead of skill. You notice another interesting detail. Some of the gold bands aren't plain. They're decorated with tiny hammered textures, barely noticeable unless you're right up close. It's jewelry-level craftsmanship, proving again that for the Etruscans, Dental work was as much about identity as it was about function. A plain band meant practicality, a textured one meant prestige. If you ever doubted that people flexed their wealth in every era, well, here's your proof. One man waiting his turn leans toward you conspiratorially. He whispers that his cousin once tried to tighten his own gold bands at home, using a rock, of all things, and ended up with a twisted metal mess that cost him 3 extra teeth. You try not to laugh, but a quiet snort escapes anyway. The craftsman shoots you both a warning look before returning to his work. You watch him finish the procedure with a final, gentle twist of the band. The woman closes her mouth slowly, testing the feel. She smiles, tentatively at first, then wide. The tooth blends seamlessly with the rest. For her, it's not just cosmetic, it's a restoration of confidence. She thanks the craftsman with genuine warmth before slipping out into the sunlight, her smile catching the morning light like a tiny, polished star. As you step back into the street, you can't help but marvel at the method. It's simple yet brilliant, fragile yet enduring, the kind of innovation born not from luxury, but from necessity and pride. And even now, centuries later, it still works, proof of the Etruscans' knack for combining practicality with artistry. The sound of metal tapping resonates behind you, another patient, another smile in the making. And you walk on, the rhythm following you, steady and delicate, like the heartbeat of a culture obsessed with the beauty and power of a perfect grin. You drift toward the sound of distant chanting, the kind that rolls low and steady like waves against a shore. It leads you through winding streets, past painted terracotta walls and doorframes draped with greenery, until you step into a broad ceremonial square. The air is thick with incense, sweet, smoky, a little dizzying, and the atmosphere feels heavier, more sacred. You watch people gather in slow, deliberate movements, dressed in rich fabrics dyed deep purple, rust red, and sun-washed gold. And as you take your place at the edge of the crowd, you begin to understand something important in Etruscan rituals. A gleaming smile wasn't just decoration, it was devotion. At the front of the square stands a raised stone platform adorned with carvings of vines, stars, and swirling motifs that seem to come alive under the morning light. A priest, draped in layered robes, lifts his arms and begins the opening invocation. His voice is calm but resonant, each word flowing like water. When he speaks, his teeth, perfectly aligned, reinforced with bands of gold polished to a near-mirror shine, catch the light with every syllable. It's not accidental, it's symbolic. In ceremonies honoring Turin or Tinia or even lesser household spirits, a bright smile was believed to reflect purity, harmony, and divine favor. It was the physical manifestation of inner balance. You shift your weight and look around, noticing how everyone seems conscious of their teeth, adjusting their lips, smoothing their expressions, widening their smiles at key ritual moments. For some, the glitter of gold is obvious, but others display more modest repairs, a sliver of bone here, a carved ivory piece there. Still, each smile shines with intention. These people aren't trying to impress each other, they're trying to please the gods. The incense grows thicker as attendants move through the crowd carrying bronze censers that glow with embers. You can smell crushed laurel leaves, warm resins, and something faintly metallic, maybe from the gold dust sometimes sprinkled into ceremonial perfumes. The mixture feels ancient and strange, and you breathe it in slowly, letting it settle like mist in your lungs. A young woman near you leans forward to whisper a secret to her friend. You catch only fragments, something about a new set of festival teeth, specially made for today's ritual. You try not to stare, but when she smiles, you see them, flawless, luminous, bound with gold so thin it nearly disappears in the curve of her mouth. They're too perfect to be casual wear. These are ceremonial accessories, worn only for special events. And surprisingly, this wasn't rare. Some Etruscans kept a separate set of false teeth strictly for religious rites, believing certain materials were more pleasing to the gods. Historians still debate which materials were preferred: ivory for purity, bone for ancestral connection, or gold for divine radiance. Here, you feel the argument spark to life. The priest continues chanting, and attendants present offerings of fruit, wine, and small gold objects shaped like teeth. Yes, literal votive teeth. The symbolism is painfully direct. Keep my smile strong. Keep my spirit whole. People in the crowd step forward, placing their own tiny offerings into a large stone bowl, carved enamel charms, miniature gold bands, smooth pebbles from sacred rivers. You watch as one man, older and dignified, lowers a small ivory piece with shaking hands. The gesture feels personal, emotional, like a parting with something cherished. At one point, the priest raises a polished bronze mirror, reflecting the sunlight across the crowd. People tilt their faces upward, letting the light wash across their mouths. Some even exaggerate their smiles, as if hoping the light will bless their teeth. It's surreal, theatrical, beautiful, and just a little funny. You catch someone next to you rolling their eyes dramatically, whispering that last year's ritual resulted in an entire section of the crowd fainting from heat instead of divine awe. You choke back a laugh. But beneath the humor and spectacle lies something deeper. These ceremonies served as reminders that beauty and spirituality were intertwined. A harmonious body, healthy, ordered, shining, reflected a harmonious soul. A broken tooth symbolized imbalance, misfortune, even vulnerability to illness or bad luck. So of course they adorned their smiles before stepping into sacred spaces. It wasn't vanity, it was protection. As the ritual reaches its quiet end, the priest lowers his hands, and the crowd releases a collective breath. The mood shifts from solemn reverence to warm chatter as people file toward a communal meal nearby. The golden, ivory, and bone-crafted smiles blend into the sunlight, turning the entire gathering into a soft shimmer of reflected light. You linger a moment longer, letting the incense dissipate around you. The air feels lighter now, as if the ritual has peeled away a layer of time. And as you step away from the square, you sense the story deepening, a thread connecting art, faith, beauty, and identity, all tied together in the glow of a single, shining smile. You follow the crowd out of the ceremonial square, letting the sounds of laughter and clinking dishes guide you toward a sprawling villa perched on a gentle slope. The place buzzes with energy, servants carrying trays, musicians tuning small stringed instruments, guests adjusting their cloaks so the embroidered edges catch the light just right. The scent of roasted herbs drifts from the kitchen, mingling with crushed grapes and warm bread. You sense you're stepping into a house where money flows like spring water. And right in the center of all this bustle stands tonight's star. A noblewoman who has just spent more on her teeth than most people spend on an entire lifetime. She glides through the courtyard with a confidence that borders on theatrical. Not arrogance, just the calm certainty of someone who knows she looks extraordinary. Her hair is braided and threaded with gold wire. Her dress dyed a deep blue that only expensive foreign pigments can achieve. But the real centerpiece is her smile. When she turns her head toward the lamp beside her, you see it, an intricate set of false teeth carved from flawless ivory. Bound and reinforced with gold filigree so delicate it looks like lace. It's stunning, beautiful, even, but when you realize the cost, you almost drop your jaw. A set like hers could easily rival the price of a sizable estate. It's not just dental work, it's a status symbol. A cultural flex. The ancient equivalent of wearing a limited edition luxury item that only a handful of people can afford. Everyone in the villa notices. 2. Whispers follow her like perfume. People tilt their heads to catch the gleam of her smile. A few guests pretend not to stare, failing miserably. You settle in near a column carved with spiraling vines as the noblewoman greets a group of dignitaries. They compliment her appearance using flowery metaphors, which was apparently the style of the time. A smile like the moonlit sea. One says, overly dramatic. She beams, showing off every glinting detail. You swear she angles her head just so, ensuring the gold threads sparkle like tiny stars. Her husband, tall, solemn, wrapped in a heavy cloak, stands beside her with the resigned air of someone who has funded more luxury purchases than he expected to in this lifetime. He doesn't say it, but his eyes give him away. There goes a few more acres of land. You try not to laugh. But then he mutters something under his breath about having to sell the prized amphora collection. And you lose the battle completely. A servant approaches with a tray of wine, and the noblewoman takes a sip with practiced elegance. You watch her carefully. You're curious how well those teeth actually work. She handles the cup delicately, definitely not biting anything hard tonight, but she moves naturally enough. Still, you notice tiny adjustments, little practiced movements that keep the gold bands from shifting. These teeth are for display, not practicality. They're meant to be admired, not used on crusty bread. And that's the interesting part. While her smile dazzles the crowd, you overhear a pair of guests gossiping behind you. One says she heard the woman spent months commissioning the design from a master craftsman known for sculpting teeth that looked divine but felt dreadful. Another claims the ivory came from a rare imported elephant tusk. Someone else swears she saw sketches of the set pinned up like a jeweler planning a custom necklace. You watch her laugh, softly, carefully, and the gold catches the lantern light again. The Etruscans didn't treat beauty as an afterthought. They treated it as architecture, something to build with intention and precision. And this noblewoman? She's the client every artisan dreamed of, wealthy, ambitious, and willing to invest in a smile that could stop conversation mid-sentence. There's a moment during the feast when a storyteller performs in the courtyard. Recounting heroic legends, the noblewoman leans forward, mesmerized. and you catch the crowd sneaking glances at her instead of listening to the tale. Her smile has become part of the entertainment. It's a silent character, commanding the room. And yet, there's an undercurrent of affection in the way people look at her. Admiration, yes, but also warmth. Her extravagant smile isn't seen as vulgar or excessive. It's a symbol of her family's success, her devotion to beauty, and her presence in the community. This world has a different relationship with luxury, one where adornment is not always ego but identity. As the evening winds down, she thanks her guests with a gentle bow. The gold at her teeth glows softly in the lamplight, not harsh or gaudy, but warm, like a reminder that beauty, no matter how expensive, carries emotion with it: pride, confidence, hope, and even a little vulnerability. You step out into the cool night air, leaving behind the music and the wine, but her shining smile lingers in your mind long after. A small, golden emblem of a culture that poured meaning into every crafted detail. You wander away from the villa as the night settles into something soft and quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a blanket pulled gently over a weary day. In the distance, you hear the muted murmur of late-night conversations, the clatter of amphorae being stacked for tomorrow's trade, and somewhere, the sleepy bray of a donkey who clearly wants to go home. But what draws you next is neither music nor celebration. It's the simple pulse of everyday life. You follow it into a lively neighborhood where the Etruscans live, eat, gossip, argue, flirt, and yes, proudly show off their upgraded smiles even during the most mundane activities. The moment you step into the street, you're hit with the warm aroma of fresh bread. A baker, sleeves rolled high and face dusted with flour, leans out of his shop to greet a friend. When he grins, you see it. A single gold-banded molar shining behind a row of worn teeth. Not fancy, not flashy, just functional. And yet he displays it with the same pride someone today might show a brand new gadget. He talks animatedly, then pauses mid-sentence to adjust the band with his tongue, an unconscious gesture that somehow makes him even more endearing. You continue walking, and the world unfolds around you in vivid snapshots. A pair of merchants haggles over dyed cloth, their voices rising and falling like a rehearsed duet. One has an ivory canine, carved just slightly sharper than nature intended. When he smiles, it gives him a mischievous look, like he's in on a joke you haven't heard yet. His friend teases him about biting through profits, and they both burst into laughter that echoes down the street. Nearby, a group of musicians practices under an awning, soft chords drifting into the evening air. One of them pauses to sip wine, then wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. When his lips pull back, you catch sight of a beautiful gold wrapped incisor. It sparkles, completely out of sync with his scruffy hair and patched tunic. And somehow that contrast makes it even more charming. He notices you looking and winks, as if to say, "Yeah, it's my best feature." As you observe, you realize something important. These people wear their dental enhancements not just at special events, but during every moment of daily life, during trade, meals, chores, and even naps. Yes, naps. You stop at a shaded portico where two men are dozing on mats. And one of them is absolutely wearing a small false tooth while snoring loudly enough to scare pigeons. You can't help it, you smile. Some cultural details are too wonderfully human to ignore. A woman selling pottery waves you over, inviting you to admire her newest collection. You notice her teeth immediately, not because they're extravagant, but because they're subtly shaped with thin bone slivers, each one smoothed and polished. She explains, with the easy openness of someone who's been selling things all day, that she wears her false teeth even while sleeping because beauty doesn't rest. Then she laughs at her own joke, delighted with herself, and you make a mental note. That's joke number 1 for the day. But there's something deeper happening too. You start catching small details in how people interact, how they smiled to soften arguments, how they flash teeth during negotiations as subtle power plays, how a glimmer of gold shifts the mood of an entire conversation. A street vendor offering figs smiles wide at customers, revealing a bright golden strip that makes him look trustworthy and prosperous. Whether the figs actually taste good, well, that's another matter. You drift toward the marketplace, drawn by the rhythmic calls of sellers announcing their wares. The air smells like olives, baked grain, and just the faintest hint of fish, nothing dramatic, but enough to remind you that this is a coastal civilization deeply connected to the sea. A young girl balancing a basket of herbs trots past, giggling with her friend. She lifts her chin proudly when she sees you looking, revealing a tiny carved tooth made of bone. Not expensive, not fancy, just loved. And then something unexpected catches your attention. A man carrying clay jars stumbles slightly, and when he looks up apologetically, you see his teeth are worn, cracked, and completely untouched by enhancements. And yet he smiles with the same brightness as everyone else. He doesn't hide his mouth, doesn't tilt his head away, doesn't pull up a cloak. His smile is simple, real, unadorned. You feel a quiet tug in your chest as he returns to his work, humming under his breath. It reminds you that in this culture, despite the glitter and glamour, beauty is shared. Not hoarded. Status may shine, but humanity glows just as warmly. Historians still debate the extent to which dental adornments were worn daily or reserved for special events. But watching this world up close, you see how fluid those categories truly were. Some people wore them for pride, some for tradition, some for confidence, some for fun, and some simply because they looked cool. As twilight deepens, lamps flicker on one by one, turning the neighborhood into a moving constellation of golden smiles. You feel oddly comforted by it, like you've slipped into a place where beauty isn't just something seen, it's something lived. The lamps glow like suspended suns as you drift farther toward the edges of the bustling neighborhood, following a faint melody carried on the evening breeze. It's different from the music you heard earlier, slower, softer, touched by something foreign and wistful. When you round a corner, you understand why. A small gathering has formed beneath a pergola draped with vines. And in the center, 2 travelers, one with sun-weathered skin and another carrying a carved cedar lyre, are telling stories of distant lands. Their accents roll strangely. Their clothing looks slightly alien compared to the locals. And their smiles, well, their smiles tell you exactly who they are. These are Phoenicians, long-distance traders, sailors of immense courage, cultural pollinators who move ideas across the sea the way bees carry pollen from flower to flower. Their presence tonight isn't unusual. The Etruscans traded constantly with the Phoenicians and the Greeks, adopting styles, technologies, and even habits from them. And as you step closer, you see how this exchange shaped something as intimate as the way people wore their teeth. One of the travelers strums the lyre and tells a tale of a distant port where glassmakers blow transparent baubles, like frozen lightning. The crowd hums with fascination. When he smiles, you notice he has a faintly different dental repair, thin strips of twisted metal that aren't quite gold. An alloy from his homeland. The Etruscans stare, intrigued, whispering to each other about the unusual color and shape. You can almost hear their thoughts. Is this a new style? Should we try this? Will it catch on? You settle beside a group of young artisans sketching rapidly on little tablets coated in wax. One murmurs that he's been experimenting with Phoenician designs for months. His friend nods vigorously, insisting that Greek aesthetics, especially their clean lines and symmetry, also influence the new, dental fashions. You almost laugh. Even thousands of years before influencers and cross-cultural fusion went digital, people were already obsessed with importing trends from abroad. The mingling continues as the travelers unpack small chests filled with items meant for trade, beads of deep blue glass, fragments of ivory carved with geometric patterns, bowls of strange aromatic spices, and thin sheets of metal that shimmer in a way you've never seen. An Etruscan woman reaches for a sheet of electrum, a natural gold-silver alloy, and holds it up to her mouth. Squinting thoughtfully, you just know she's imagining how it would look bound across her front teeth. Another woman tries on a necklace, then jokes that it might match a future dental band. Everyone laughs. The mood is lively, warm, almost giddy with curiosity. A Greek traveler joins the conversation, proudly flashing a tooth capped with a bit of bronze. Unlike the Etruscans, some Greeks favored practicality over beauty, using repairs designed more for chewing than showing. But here in this blended crowd, even his bronze tooth becomes a stylish conversation piece. The Etruscans pepper him with questions about his homeland's aesthetics, comparing artistic traditions like fashion critics debating next season's trends. You take a moment to step back from the crowd. The scene is vibrant, social, full of movement, a perfect representation of how cultures flow into one another. You notice an Etruscan craftsman jotting notes on how the Phoenicians twist metal wires, already envisioning a new dental technique. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation, it happens in scenes just like this. One man near you quietly mentions that certain ivory carvings from the East hold symbolic meaning, luck, fertility, protection, and that incorporating them into false teeth might attract blessings. Another counters that the Greeks famously sculpted teeth with near-perfect proportions, and that adopting their style would create smiles that reflect mathematical harmony. A woman nearby insists that using Phoenician metals would create the strongest bands yet. Historians still debate which culture influenced Etruscan dental aesthetics most heavily, but standing here, watching the exchange unfold, you can tell the answer is simply, all of them. As the conversation continues, someone makes a joke about starting the Mediterranean's first artisanal tooth boutique. You laugh along with everyone else, imagining a chalkboard sign offering custom ivory incisors and gold bands. Greek Twist Edition. It's absurd, and yet strangely believable. There's something magical about this moment, cultures blending not through conquest or conflict, but through curiosity, admiration, and the shared human desire to look just a little more radiant. The Etruscans don't steal ideas, nor do they mimic them. They absorb, adapt, reinterpret. A little Greek symmetry here, a little Phoenician metalwork there. The result? A unique dental art form that becomes one of their civilization's most iconic signatures. As the music fades and people begin drifting home, you watch an Etruscan girl chatting excitedly with her mother about trying the new Phoenician twist band next time she visits the craftsman. Her mother laughs, saying they'll see if the price is reasonable. You already know it won't be. But she'll probably still do it. That's influence. That's beauty. That's culture at work. The night settles deeper, cool and calm, as the last notes of the lyre dissolve into silence. You walk away with the realization that the Etruscan smile wasn't born in isolation. It was forged in conversation, in exchange, in the shimmer of foreign metal under lamplight, in the meeting of distant worlds along familiar streets. You wander away from the herbal stalls, still recovering from the memory of crocodile dung skincare, when a sharp cry slices through the gentle morning hum. It's not a scream, more like a muffled yelp. The kind someone makes when they've bitten into something they absolutely shouldn't have. Curious, and maybe a little concerned, you follow the sound toward a modest stone building tucked between a row of workshops. A wooden sign hangs above the door, marked with a symbol that looks like a tooth wrapped in a swirling ribbon. You hesitate, then you realize you've just stumbled into the Etruscan version of a dental clinic. If you were hoping for a relaxing spa environment, let's just say, temper your expectations. The moment you step inside, you're greeted by a mix of scents, crushed herbs, warm oil, burning resin, and something faintly metallic. A man sits in a chair carved directly from stone, leaning back awkwardly as an elderly practitioner inspects his gums with the intensity of a hawk spotting prey. The practitioner has wild white hair, sharp eyes, and hands steady enough to perform heart surgery. If heart surgery existed yet. He mutters instructions in a low, soothing tone, though you're not convinced the patient feels soothed at all. Beside the practitioner stands a row of tools laid out on a table. Some look familiar, hooks, picks, scrapers, but others resemble tiny farming equipment or jewelry implements. And that makes sense. Dentistry here isn't a medical specialty. It's a hybrid profession born from metalworking, herbal healing, and a pinch of superstition. You creep closer as the practitioner lifts a small bronze instrument, warming it briefly over an oil lamp. The patient winces the moment the tool approaches. You instinctively brace yourself. The practitioner carefully touches the tool to an inflamed gum, murmuring something under his breath. You tilt your head and listen. It's a charm, half prayer, half encouragement, asking the gods to soften the pain and strengthen the vessel. Vessel, here, meaning the mouth. It's equal parts tender and unsettling. When he finishes, the practitioner applies a resin made from pine sap and an herbal paste that smells strongly of sage. He explains to the patient that the mixture will draw out the fire from the infection. You're not sure how much science is involved, but the patient visibly relaxes as the mixture cools against his gum. It's not perfect medicine, but it's something. And honestly, given what you've seen so far, you're impressed he isn't using crocodile dung for this too. A woman enters next. Clutching her cheek dramatically, she complains about a throbbing tooth. Speaking in rapid-fire frustration, the practitioner listens patiently, then reaches for a clay jar filled with something dark and sticky. When he opens it, the smell of herbs fills the room: fennel, mint, maybe a whisper of myrrh. He places a small dab of the mixture on her finger and tells her to press it gently into the cavity. She does, and her face softens as the pain eases. An herbal analgesic, simple but effective. Then comes the part you weren't expecting. A young man walks in with a chipped tooth, freshly broken from biting into a stone hidden in a loaf of bread. Yes, a literal stone. You can practically feel his frustration vibrating through the air. The practitioner examines the chip and nods, then calls over an apprentice. The apprentice retrieves a small pouch of bone fragments. Polished smooth, the practitioner selects one, shapes it with a tiny file, and then fits it seamlessly onto the chipped edge using a gold band. The repair is fast, elegant, and surprisingly beautiful. You watch, mesmerized. It's the same fusion of art and practicality you've seen again and again: dentistry as craftsmanship, healing as sculpture. The apprentice, eager to impress, whispers to you that some healers in the countryside still use spells to treat toothaches, chanting to drive out the worm of pain. A mythical creature believed to burrow into teeth. You blink. He nods enthusiastically. The worm hates loud voices. He explains, so you shout, and it leaves. You stifle a laugh so hard it aches. Joke number 1 for this section: the mental image of villagers shouting at their molars. But beneath the humor lies something meaningful. Etruscan medicine blends practical herbal knowledge with spiritual belief, each treated with equal respect. They didn't see science and magic as opposites, they saw them as partners. As you look around the room, you notice small charms hanging from the ceiling, tiny bronze teeth, strands of knotted thread, even miniature silver hammers. These weren't decorations. They were protective talismans, meant to keep misfortune away from the clinic. You find yourself half believing they work. The practitioner finally sits down, wiping his hands with a cloth soaked in wine. He smiles at you, an honest, tired smile revealing a single, well-maintained gold band around his canine. He tells you that caring for teeth isn't just about health. It's about dignity, presence, and the ability to speak and eat without shame. A strong mouth, he says softly, makes a strong life. You step out into the sunlight again, feeling strangely moved. You'd expected crude tools and rough procedures. Instead, you found a world where healing is layered, physical, emotional, artistic, and spiritual all at once. A world where even pain is met with ritual, patience, and gentle hands. And as you walk toward the next chapter of this ancient world, you can't help but admire how the Etruscans gave even the simplest human struggle, like a toothache, a sense of meaning. You walk away from the dental healer's workshop with the faint scent of herbs still clinging to your clothes. Drifting once again through the winding streets of the Etruscan city. The day is bright now, sunlight pooling like liquid gold between terracotta rooftops, and the murmur of daily life swells around you. But then you hear something different, the unmistakable sound of haggling. Loud, dramatic, heartfelt haggling, and you're drawn to it like a moth to a candle. You follow the voices into a spacious, open-air market buzzing with vendors selling everything from figs to fabrics to bronze tools shaped like little animals. But tucked in a quieter corner is something far more unusual. A stall lined not with fruit or pottery, but with teeth, lots of teeth, human teeth, animal teeth, carved bone teeth, polished ivory teeth, displayed like you might display gemstones or rare shells. Welcome to the Etruscan dental marketplace. And yes, it's exactly as strange as it sounds. The vendor, a wiry man with a bright scarf and a grin too wide to be natural, is enthusiastically showing a customer a beautiful canine-shaped piece of ivory. The man holds it up to the light with the scrutiny of a jeweler assessing a diamond. The vendor rattles off a string of qualities: clean grain, smooth cut, perfect for a nobleman's smile, imported from a Phoenician trader. You find yourself almost convinced, even though you have zero intention of buying a tooth today. You edge closer, fascinated by the sheer variety on display. Some teeth lie in neat rows, grouped by size: incisors, canines, molars. Others are carved into specific shapes, with tiny holes drilled through for attaching gold bands. A separate tray contains polished animal teeth, boar tusk pieces, deer bone fragments, labeled for strength and durability. The vendor proudly explains that certain customers request specific materials for symbolic reasons. Boar tusk implies bravery. Ivory implies purity. Bone suggests ancestral devotion. Historians still debate exactly how these symbolic associations developed, but you can see how naturally they fit into the Etruscan worldview. A woman approaches the stall holding a small cloth pouch. She empties it onto the table, revealing two loose human teeth that look well worn, to say the least. The vendor examines them with exaggerated seriousness, tapping one with a bronze pick. Too soft, he declares. Maybe good for a child's charm, but not for anchoring. She sighs dramatically, mutters something about being cheated by her cousin, and walks away. You try not to laugh, but fail. The vendor hears you and winks. Family teeth, he says knowingly, are always unpredictable. A group of apprentices arrives next, gathering around a section of the stall selling metal materials, thin coils of gold wire, sheets of bronze, and twisted electrum strands. They huddled together, comparing techniques they heard from Phoenician travelers the night before. One boy excitedly describes a new way of braiding metal threads for decorative bands, while another insists that using two types of metal creates a more flexible anchor. The vendor nods along proudly, like a teacher watching his students debate. Then you notice a small, discreet basket near the back of the stall. Its contents are different, older, more weathered. These aren't decorative pieces. These are reclaimed teeth, some gently worn, some cracked, some perfectly preserved. The vendor whispers that these come from burial sites disturbed by storms or erosion. Reclaimed, cleaned, repurposed. You pause, feeling a twinge of discomfort. But he quickly adds that families often preferred their loved ones' teeth to be reused rather than lost. Better in someone's smile, he says, than forgotten in the soil. You don't know whether that's reverent or unsettling, but in this world, it makes sense. Nearby, A pair of elderly women bicker loudly over the price of a tiny golden band. One insists it's overpriced. The other argues it's crafted with a rare pattern that the gods adore. Eventually, they settle on a compromise, and the vendor throws in a small bone sliver, just to keep the peace. Another vendor down the road displays tools rather than teeth, intricately carved bone files, polished bronze drills, miniature clamps shaped like birds. A young artisan tests a drill, marveling at the smoothness, and tells his friend he plans to use it to create a more precise fit for a customer's incisor. You watch as he traces a design in the air, clearly imagining the gold-banded masterpiece he'll soon craft. You overhear yet another conversation, this one between two scholars discussing imported materials. One insists that Greek ivory cuts more cleanly than local sources. The other argues that certain Phoenician metals bond better with gold. Their debate spirals into broader philosophical territory, and you can't help but smile. Historians still argue about this exact topic today. But these two men are doing it in real time, with passion, conviction, and a hint of theatrical flair. As you wander deeper into the market, you notice that people aren't just here for repairs or teeth, they're here for identity, for confidence, for artistry. A smile in this world isn't a necessity, it's a conversation piece, a social declaration, a crafted symbol of individuality. A young woman finally approaches the stall with the wide grinning vendor. She hesitates, then points to a gleaming ivory incisor carved with a subtle swirl pattern along the root. The vendor nods knowingly. A bold choice, he says. Very modern. She beams, not with her teeth yet, but with her eyes, and hands over a collection of tiny silver coins. You watch her walk away clutching her new tooth like treasure. And somehow, it is treasure. This market, strange and bustling as it is, reveals a truth that has echoed through every step of your journey. The Etruscans didn't just fix smiles. They crafted them, curated them, celebrated them. They made art out of something most people overlook. The afternoon sun slides lower across the sky, turning the streets honey gold as you leave the bustling dental market behind. You're still thinking about the girl clutching her brand new ivory incisor when a sudden burst of chaotic laughter erupts nearby, followed by a gasp, a clatter, and what can only be described as the universal sound of a crowd trying very hard not to laugh. Naturally, you head straight for it. You find yourself in the courtyard of a modest administrative building, where officials have gathered for what appears to be a routine public ceremony. Nothing extravagant, just a few speeches, a blessing from a priest, and a formal acknowledgement of some tax records. Very respectable, very official, very boring. At least, it was boring until the moment you arrive. Front and center stands a well-dressed magistrate, robes immaculate, posture impeccable, hair braided with the precision of someone who takes their morning routine extremely seriously. He steps forward to address the crowd, lifts his chin, opens his mouth to deliver the first booming line of his speech. And his entire upper set of false teeth slides forward and drops straight out of his mouth onto the stone floor. With a tiny, tragic clink, the courtyard freezes. For a heartbeat, time stops. Even the pigeons pause mid-coo. The magistrate, horrified, stares down at the fallen teeth as though trying to convince gravity to reverse itself. His assistants stare, the priest stares, the crowd stares, and you try so hard not to laugh. But a sound escapes you anyway, a tiny snort you immediately regret. One elderly woman next to you whispers, "Oh dear, not again," which sends you spinning into silent hysterics. To the magistrate's credit, he reacts with surprising agility. He coughs loudly, mutters something about the dry weather, as if dryness can unhook gold bands, and bends down to retrieve the errant dental piece with as much dignity as a man can muster while scooping his own teeth off the ground. But the damage is done. The crowd is rippling with poorly concealed amusement. His assistant rushes over, dusts the false teeth with his sleeve, and whispers urgently, probably something like, "Sir, you must tighten your bands more often," or "I told you not to eat figs before speaking." The magistrate nervously reinstalls his dental masterpiece, taking a moment to adjust the gold loops more securely. Then he clears his throat and continues the speech as though absolutely nothing happened. Except, the crowd keeps staring at his mouth. Every single word, waiting for a sequel. And just when you think the moment couldn't become more iconic, a child in the front row shouts, "Tie it tighter next time," and the entire group dissolves into laughter. Even the priest cracks a smile. You take a step back, letting the hilarity fade, but as you watch the scene settle, something else reveals itself, something deeper than slapstick comedy. Moments like this were part of the Etruscan experience. False teeth were both status symbols and practical tools. But they were also fragile, prone to slipping, prone to loosening, prone to causing exactly the kind of story that would get whispered for decades. In fact, you overhear two men discussing it behind you. "This will go down in history," one says dramatically. "It already has," the other replies. "Remember the high priest who sneezed his incisors during the harvest blessing?" You nearly choke trying not to laugh again. The more you listen, the more you realize that the Etruscans had a surprisingly good sense of humor about these mishaps. Maybe because everyone, rich or poor, knew the struggle of maintaining their carefully crafted smiles. Maybe because a culture that values beauty so deeply must also learn to laugh when beauty misbehaves. A woman nearby leans over to her friend and whispers, "At least his false teeth are more loyal than my last boyfriend." That one sends you reeling. Joke number one, and it's perfect. But even humor aside, these accidents reveal something important. They show the delicate balance between practicality and ornament. They show the trust people placed in their artisans. And they show how, even thousands of years ago, appearances came with their own brand of unpredictable chaos. As the ceremony wraps up, the magistrate makes a hasty exit, smiling stiffly, lips a little tighter than before. You can tell he'll be visiting a craftsman tonight to tighten those golden loops by at least 3 extra twists. Once the crowd disperses, you're left in the warm afternoon light, feeling the blend of humanity and humor settle warmly around you. The Etruscans weren't perfect. Their teeth definitely weren't perfect. But their ability to carry on, with dignity, laughter, and a bit of gold, makes them feel startlingly familiar. The laughter from the magistrate's mishap fades behind you as you wander deeper into the heart of the city. Afternoon sunlight slants across terracotta rooftops, warming the stone beneath your feet. And the mood of the streets shifts once more, quieter now. Gentler. Tinted with that soft haze that settles over a place when the day is old but not yet tired. You find yourself near a row of elegant homes, each with carved lintels and shaded porticos. And something in the air nudges you toward a quieter kind of discovery. You pause near a fountain decorated with dolphins, listening to the steady trickle of water as people drift past. Their gestures are slow now, relaxed, families strolling, couples talking in low tones, artisans heading home with tools tucked under their arms. And everywhere, you see smiles. Not the showy ones. Not the gold flashing, festival bright grins. But the softer kind, natural, personal, honest. And they tell you something important. You sit near the fountain and let the world unfold in front of you. A pair of women walk by, chatting about the best dye for wool and occasionally laughing with their hands over their mouths. Not to hide anything, just a gentle habit. Then two young men pass, debating whether polished bone or smooth ivory looks more fashionable this year. One insists bone is earthy sophistication. The other claims ivory is timeless elegance. You swear they could have their own style podcast. But as you keep watching, you begin to understand the deeper meaning behind all this attention to teeth. It's not just vanity. It never was. In the Etruscan world, beauty is harmony. A well-shaped face, balanced proportions, graceful posture. These are not frivolous traits, but reflections of inner order, emotional stability, even divine favor. The smile sits at the center of all that, like a hinge connecting your inner self to the outer world. And so the teeth, brightened, polished, replaced, or enhanced, become symbols of that connection. A woman nearby sits on a low stone wall, adjusting her sandals. She smiles at her friend, revealing a single gold-capped premolar. Nothing extravagant, but the gold gleams warmly. And she carries herself with such confidence that you can tell the enhancement isn't about showing off. It's about belonging to herself. It's about feeling complete. You walk on and find a group of teenage girls practicing dance steps, laughing whenever someone's foot slips. One girl smiles shyly every time she gets the rhythm right, a small, imperfect, utterly human smile marked by a bone filler tooth that's slightly lighter than the rest. And yet she glows. Her smile lifts the whole group's mood. You realize that in Etruscan beauty, perfection matters less than expression. A smile that reveals joy is more powerful than one polished into stillness. You overhear a quiet discussion between two elders seated on a shaded bench. One says, "The young care so much about looking perfect." The other chuckles, "We did too, but the gods love sincerity more than symmetry." You file that away like a small, unexpected treasure. As you continue walking, you begin noticing how the beauty ideals shift from person to person. A merchant with worn teeth doesn't hide them, he laughs boldly, wrinkles deepening around his eyes. A noblewoman with a carved ivory molar smiles with elegance but also warmth. A child missing two front teeth beams proudly at a puppy trotting by. The variety is soothing, like walking through a gallery where each artwork is unique but all share the same theme: presence, confidence, humanity. Historians still debate which standards defined Etruscan beauty most strongly: Greek symmetry, Phoenician refinement, local spiritual beliefs. But looking around, you understand the truth that scholars sometimes miss. Beauty here isn't about achieving a single ideal. It's about honoring the self, enhancing what you have, celebrating the face you present to the world. That's why gold bands mattered. Why false teeth were crafted with love. Why people talked about their smiles with the same pride they discussed their family lineage. A soft breeze brushes past, carrying the smell of warm clay and blooming herbs. You settle into the moment, letting the city breathe around you. The Etruscans didn't chase beauty the way modern society does, with anxiety or comparison. They embraced it as ritual, as language, as identity, and they accepted that sometimes identity slips out of your mouth and clinks off a stone floor during a speech. It happens. You smiled to yourself, feeling a sense of closeness to these ancient people who valued elegance but laughed when elegance misbehaved, who honored harmony but welcomed imperfections, who believed that beauty lived not only in the gold on your teeth but in the warmth behind your smile. As twilight begins to stretch its cool fingers across the rooftops, you feel the story deepening again, calling you forward. There are still more layers to unfold, more truths to uncover, more glimmers of gold tucked inside the world of the Etruscans. Twilight deepens into a dusky violet as you follow a quiet road leading away from the residential streets and toward the city's outskirts. The air shifts, cooler now, tinged with smoke from distant hearths and the faint metallic scent of sharpened bronze. You soon hear the unmistakable clash of practice weapons and the rhythmic shouts of men drilling in formation. You're approaching an Etruscan training ground, where soldiers sharpen more than just their blades. You slip into the shadows of a wooden fence and watch as warriors move across the field. Their movements are fluid but powerful, lunging, blocking, striking with the kind of precision that comes only from relentless practice. The dying light catches on the edges of their helmets, their chest plates, and their teeth. Yes, their teeth. Because even here, in the grit and sweat of a training field, the Etruscan obsession with smiles doesn't take a day off. One warrior removes his helmet, revealing a fierce grin studded with a gold-banded canine that shines like a tiny sun. Another arches an eyebrow, teasing him. Trying to blind the enemy with that thing? The warrior flexes a wide grin. Only if the spear doesn't work. The group erupts into laughter. The kind that comes from camaraderie carved through hardship. You find yourself smiling too. Joke number 1 for this section, achieved. As you draw closer, you notice something fascinating. Several of these warriors are wearing decorative dental pieces, nothing too extravagant, but enough to catch the light. One has a carved boar tusk molar symbolizing strength. Another features a thin strip of electrum banding around an incisor, giving his smile a sharp, almost intimidating glint. These enhancements aren't vanity, they're symbols of identity. Tokens of power, even talismans of protection. The Etruscans believed the mouth was a gateway of breath, spirit, and speech. Warriors often enhanced their smiles to project intimidation, authority, or divine favor. Some accounts even suggest soldiers believed golden teeth could distract enemies or signal blessing from the gods. Historians still debate whether these enhancements were practical, symbolic, or just a kind of ancient battlefield swagger. Watching these men grin through their drills, you suspect it might have been all three. A captain calls for formation, and the men snap into orderly rows. Their armor clinks softly as they raise their shields. The captain paces, giving instructions on shield angles, spear thrusts, and stance. He stops beside one soldier, the one with the bored tusk tooth, and corrects his posture with a firm tap on the shoulder. Then he adds with a smirk, "And stop baring your teeth like you're courting the goddess of war." The soldier, caught off guard, mutters, "It's my lucky tooth." The captain snorts, "Then let it stay lucky and don't knock it loose." You marvel at the moment, equal parts strict discipline and affectionate teasing. These men live in a world where beauty and battle intertwine, where a tooth can be both ornament and omen. As drills continue, the air fills with dust kicked up by marching feet. A younger recruit stumbles slightly, eliciting a laugh from the older soldiers. He blushes and flashes a nervous smile, revealing a newly installed gold-banded tooth. It's slightly crooked, not fully settled, and one of the men teases him for it. "Careful," he says, "if that thing falls out in battle, we're not stopping to pick it up." The recruit groans. "My sister says it looks heroic." "It looks expensive," another replies, "so try not to break it." The recruit mutters something like, "I hate all of you." But the fondness in his voice betrays him. It's the kind of banter that makes harsh training bearable. The kind that builds trust and brotherhood. Then something unexpected happens. An older warrior approaches the fire pit near the edge of the field. He sits, rubs his jaw, and removes a thin golden band that had been holding one of his teeth in place. He examines it thoughtfully before placing it into a small leather pouch. A younger soldier sitting beside him asks why he took it out. The older man shrugs. "Too loose. Better to remove it now than lose it in battle." The younger nods solemnly, as if this is not about a tooth but a piece of armor. And in a way, it is. You watch as they sit there, illuminated by firelight, discussing everything from tactics to home life to the best craftsmen for dental repairs. The conversation is quiet, intimate, humanizing. You'd never expect warriors, stoic, grim, hardened, to talk about their teeth with such sincerity. But here, it makes perfect sense. For the Etruscans, the smile wasn't merely cosmetic. It was power, a symbol, a legacy, something worth protecting even on the battlefield. As night deepens, the soldiers finish drilling and disperse to their homes. The field grows silent, save for the crackling of the fire. You take one last look at the empty space where warriors once stood. A place where gold glimmered as brightly as bronze. Where intimidation met artistry. Where warriors didn't just bear weapons but wore their identity in every gleam of their teeth. And as you turn back toward the city, you sense that the story isn't done teaching you. There are still deeper, stranger truths waiting beneath the thin gold bands of this civilization's smiles. Night settles over the city like a deep indigo cloak, and you feel yourself moving through quieter streets now, spaces where lamps burn low, where conversations soften, and where you can hear your own footsteps echo between stone walls. You've seen the artistry, the rituals, the pride, the humor, even the battlefield swagger behind Etruscan smiles, but tonight, you're about to uncover something far stranger. Something most people never learn about this civilization. You follow a narrow alley lit by a single flickering oil lamp. Its flame bending in the breeze like it's trying to point you somewhere. At the end of the path sits a small domed structure, unassuming. A little shabby, but warm light spills softly from within. When you push open the door, you enter a room that feels secretive, quiet, almost conspiratorial. Inside, a group of artisans sits around a low table cluttered with tools. Banding wires, tiny chisels, bone fragments, and something else. Something that looks ornamental, decorative, oddly theatrical. They glance at you, then back at their work. Not suspicious but amused, like they assume you're here because you already know the secret. Spoiler: you absolutely do not. One of the artisans, a young man with quick hands and an easy smile, motions for you to come closer. He lifts a small wooden tray to show you something peculiar, a set of false teeth so thin, so fragile looking, and so obviously impractical that you instantly know these were never meant to chew anything tougher than air. These are costume teeth, party teeth, performance teeth, designed purely to be admired. You blink. He grins. Yes, his expression says, they're exactly what you think they are. He explains, half whispering like he's sharing gossip, that some wealthy Etruscans commissioned special sets of false teeth strictly for banquets, dances, or evening gatherings, not for eating, not for talking, just for showing off. The ultimate accessory. Gold bands looped delicately around carved ivory or bone pieces shaped into idealized versions of natural teeth, some with subtle patterns etched along their edges. Others polished to a reflective sheen. He picks up one particularly elaborate piece and holds it to the lamplight. It gleams like moonlit glass. This one, he says, is for a nobleman who wears it only at night. He removes it before the first toast. You can't help but laugh. It's so unnecessarily dramatic, so wonderfully human. Imagine buying expensive teeth just for the aesthetic of a single evening, and then removing them the moment someone hands you a grape. But as amusing as it is, the practice reveals something unexpected about Etruscan life. Their sense of beauty wasn't tied to practicality. It wasn't even tied to consistency. Beauty was something that could shift depending on the moment, the event, the company, and smiles were curated with the same intentionality someone today might reserve for a luxury watch or a gala dress. Nearby, an older artisan carefully engraves a pattern onto a gold band, swirls that mimic ocean waves. You ask if the design has meaning. He shrugs and says, sometimes, sometimes not. Sometimes things are beautiful simply because we want them to be. There's an honesty in that answer that lingers in the air. Another artisan reveals a tiny box filled with unused decorative teeth, varying shapes and colors. Some are elongated, some are shorter. One has a slight upward curve that gives the wearer an almost mischievous expression. He tells you these character smiles became a minor trend among nobles for a few years, similar to how people today might experiment with fashion silhouettes. You find yourself wondering, did someone commission teeth to look more dignified? More youthful? More mysterious? More intimidating? The artisans nod knowingly at your unspoken questions. Yes, every version, all of the above. You overhear one of them explaining a commission for a woman who wanted her smile to appear gentler during evening ceremonies. A softened curve, a slightly rounded incisor, a shift so subtle no one could identify it, but everyone would feel it. That's the level of detail these people cared about. Not perfection, expression, vibe, mood. Historians still debate whether these decorative sets served ritual purposes, social signaling, or pure vanity. But watching these artisans craft smiles like musicians composing melodies, you understand something deeper. The Etruscans saw the face as a canvas for intention, a curated message to the world. One artisan hands you a tooth, light as a pebble, cool to the touch. It's carved with such precision that it feels unreal. You imagine slipping it into your smile for a festival evening, knowing it doesn't help you chew or speak, but that it completes something. The lamp flickers again, and suddenly the room feels softer, warmer, threaded with warmth from people who create beauty simply because they can. As you step outside, night air pours over you like cool water. The stars shimmer overhead, bright as the tiny gold patterns you just saw, and you realize you've discovered a truth that ties this whole world together. The Etruscans didn't craft smiles for utility alone. They crafted them for self-expression, for presence, for the quiet joy of shaping who they were, even for a moment. You walk back into the night, your mind still buzzing with the idea of decorative, party-only teeth. The city feels different now, like it's holding one last secret just behind the lamps and shadows. And sure enough, as you follow the curve of the main road downhill, you begin to hear a new sound rising from a plaza ahead. Not music, not prayer, not the clatter of artisans working late. It's conversation. Animated, loud, heated conversation. The exact kind that happens when two cultures collide in a way neither fully expected. You step into the plaza and immediately spot the source. A Roman delegation, early Romans, not yet the empire makers they'll become, is standing stiff-backed beside a set of Etruscan officials. Their postures are polite, their faces are strained, their voices rise and fall in the unmistakable cadence of diplomacy laced with shock. It doesn't take you long to see why. Because the Romans cannot stop staring at the Etruscans' teeth. One Roman ambassador, tall, stone-faced, the type who probably practices intimidating eyebrow angles in the mirror, tilts his chin upward to speak. But the moment an Etruscan noblewoman smiles back at him, revealing a gold-banded masterpiece, he visibly flinches. Not much, just a twitch, but a twitch is enough. The Etruscan noblewoman catches it and raises one eyebrow, as if to say, "Really? You've never seen beauty before?" To be fair, the Romans weren't used to this kind of glamour. Their early society valued simplicity, plain clothing, reserved demeanor, modest displays of wealth. Gold teeth? That was a lot. Especially when half the Etruscan officials here seem to have gold flashing from their mouths every time they laugh. And Etruscans laugh often. One Roman murmurs to another, "Do they wear jewelry in their mouths?" The second Roman nods slowly, as though observing an exotic bird. "I believe so." The first whispers, "Is it offensive to look directly at it?" The second coughs. At this point, "I don't know." You bite your lip to keep from laughing. Joke number 1 for this section. the Romans struggling like they're at a surprise fashion show. Meanwhile, the Etruscans seem entirely unbothered. An aristocrat with a broad, gleaming smile explains a trade proposal. And every time his gold catches the lamplight, the Romans blink like they're being repeatedly flashed by a tiny sun. One younger Etruscan leans toward his friend and whispers loudly enough for you to hear. Do you think they've never seen a proper smile before? His friend snickers. They don't even wear color. What do you expect? You're witnessing cultural whiplash in real time. But look deeper, and something more significant is happening beneath the humor. The Romans aren't just surprised. They're intrigued. One Roman scholar, curious rather than judgmental, steps closer to an Etruscan craftsman. He asks, through a translator, how the gold bands are fastened. The craftsman demonstrates with a set of sample teeth, weaving a thin strip of gold with practiced elegance. The Roman leans closer. Fascinated, he asks questions, dozens of them. Rapid and precise. The craftsman answers proudly. You can practically see the Roman mind whirring. Could this work for us? Would this impress our senators? Should I try this myself? Would my wife faint? You overhear an Etruscan priest explaining the spiritual symbolism of gold teeth, how they reflect the favor of certain gods, how they signify strength of spirit. The Romans listen carefully, nodding slowly. They may not adopt the belief, but they respect it. Historians still debate how much Etruscan culture influenced early Rome, especially in aesthetics and ritual. But standing here, watching curiosity melt into admiration, the answer feels obvious. Rome absorbed far more from the Etruscans than they ever admitted. You notice one Roman soldier, younger and less stiff than the others, examining a decorative band displayed by an artisan. He tries it on, just for fun. The crowd gasps. His commanding officer stares at him in horror. The soldier shrugs sheepishly. The Etruscans cheer. And honestly, the band suits him. A small boy tugs on his mother's sleeve and points at the Romans. Why don't they smile? He asks. The mother replies softly, because they're new here. Give them time. You feel that line in your chest. It carries truth beyond tonight. As the meeting winds down, the Romans bow respectfully, still processing everything they've seen. The Etruscans smile back, bright, gold-threaded, unabashedly radiant. Two cultures trying to understand each other in a plaza lit by lamps and teeth. As the Romans leave, one of them, thinking no one is listening, mutters, "I have never felt so underdressed in my life." And with that, the Etruscans burst into laughter. The night softens again as the voices fade, and you feel the shifting tide of history move around you. Rome is rising, Etruria is glowing, and in this moment, their worlds brush gently together, curiosity meeting brilliance, practicality meeting artistry, restraint meeting radiance. You leave the plaza and its mix of Roman awkwardness and Etruscan radiance behind, stepping into a part of the city where the lamps burn lower. The streets narrow, and the hush of evening settles like dust on old stone. Something has shifted, not just in the world you're observing, but in the era itself. And as you follow the quiet road, you begin to feel the weight of a culture slowly bending beneath the shadow of another. The Etruscans are still here, laughing, crafting, debating, celebrating, but there's a subtle tension in the air now. Rome is rising, influence is shifting, and traditions that once seemed permanent are beginning to soften at their edges. You eventually reach a courtyard where several artisans are packing away their tools for the night. Gold wire spools are stacked neatly. Bone fragments sorted, ivory slivers stored in tiny wooden boxes. The workbenches look the same as they did days ago, and yet you sense the quiet truth humming beneath the surface. Something is fading. One artisan, older and slow in his movements, sits on a stool polishing a gold band with a cloth worn thin by decades of use. He glances up at you, then at the nearly empty workshop around him. "Fewer orders this month," he says softly, not complaining, just observing. You ask why. He shrugs. "Roman styles are plainer, more practical. They don't gild the mouth the way we do. And when Rome grows, everything bends toward its taste." You feel that, a small ache behind the ribs. Beauty shifting, not by choice but by influence. Nearby, two younger craftsmen argue about whether to adopt Roman metalwork techniques. "We must adapt," one says. "If we don't, no one will buy from us." The gods favor tradition, the other insists, squeezing a gold ribbon so tightly it warps. "If we change too much, we lose ourselves." Historians still debate how quickly Etruscan dental practices disappeared, or evolved, but listening to these voices, you feel the truth. Change rarely happens in a single moment. It's a slow erosion, like water carving stone. You walk deeper into the courtyard and find a woman kneeling beside a small basket of tools. She's carefully laying out gold strips, measuring them against sculpted toothpieces with a precise eye. Her smile is warm, but tired. "My mother taught me this craft," she says. Her mother, too. In their time, people came from every city to have their smiles shaped here. She lifts one of the gold bands, thin as a hair. Now, some say it is unnecessary, outdated. You study her workspace, beautiful tools, carefully arranged, each one carrying the legacy of generations. You realize this is more than a profession. It's heritage, identity, a thread connecting families across centuries. A young apprentice approaches her, holding a Roman-style dental repair, simple bronze wire, unornamented. "Should I practice this?" he asks. She pauses, then nods, slowly. "We have to know everything," she says gently, "even the things we do not love." Her voice doesn't break, but something inside your chest does. You leave them and wander into the street, where an Etruscan noblewoman passes with a smile far less elaborate than the ones you saw earlier. Her teeth are adorned, but modestly. A single band of gold. A lone carved incisor. Traditional, but simplified. Compromised. On a nearby bench, two elders talk quietly. "One day," one says, "people will forget how much artistry lived in a smile." You think so? I do. Rome writes the story now. But then the second elder shakes his head. "We are carved into the foundations. Even if hidden, we remain." You continue walking, letting their words echo behind you. Farther on, you find a once bustling workshop now shuttered, its door tied closed with fraying rope. The sign above it, depicting a stylized gold-toothed grin, hangs crooked. Dust gathers along the threshold. You trace your fingers along the faded paint and feel the slow turning of eras. Yet not everything is slipping away. As you pass the final workshop on the street, you hear laughter, the bright, irrepressible kind you've come to expect from this civilization. Inside, a family sits together while a father works on a simple gold band for his daughter. She's missing a tooth, lost in a game earlier that day, and she beams proudly as he shapes her new one. You stand in the doorway and watch the scene quietly, letting it soften you. Traditions may fade, styles may shift, empires may rise, but the human desire to shape beauty, to craft identity, to express joy, that remains. Outside, night thickens, stars glitter, and somewhere in the dark, the sound of a hammer tapping against gold echoes, steady, persistent, refusing to disappear completely. Night drapes softly over the rooftops as you drift toward the northern edge of the city, quieter now. Emptier, shaped by wind and moonlight instead of crowds and laughter. The air feels cooler here, carrying the scent of cypress and damp earth. And ahead, you see small flickers of torchlight moving like fireflies near the hills. You follow the glow, drawn by a pull you can't quite name, until the path opens into a wide excavation site. Archaeologists, not modern ones, but ancient ones in their own right, are working late into the evening. Except these aren't Etruscans. These are you and your time. This is the present slipping into the story. Suddenly you realize you've stepped out of the living world and into the world of excavation. Not metaphorically, literally. Lamplight shines on protective tents, catalog tables, and half-uncovered chambers stretching into the hillside. The hum of generators sits faint under the night wind, and you hear the faint clink of metal tools brushing against stone. You stand just outside the final tent, where a group of modern archaeologists gather around something that has clearly left them breathless. You step closer, curiosity tugging at your sleeve, and there, inside a glass display tray resting on a padded cloth, lies a set of Etruscan false teeth, still intact, still gleaming, still unmistakably crafted with incredible skill, still bound with gold that refuses to tarnish, even after 25 centuries of sleep. The sight hits you so suddenly, so deeply, that for a moment you forget to breathe. You've seen these teeth in workshops, in rituals, in markets, in laughter, but now you're seeing what remains of them when time has taken everything else. A nearby archaeologist adjusts her glasses and leans forward, shining a beam of soft light across the artifact. "This one's unusual," she murmurs. "The gold band is thinner than most. And look, carved patterning. Faint wave motifs. You almost never see that preserved." Her colleague nods. The craftsmanship is unreal. They weren't just making replacements. They were making art. You feel a quiet tremor in your chest. Because you know the hands that made this. You walked through their workshops. You saw the concentration in their faces. You watched families cherish these delicate pieces like heirlooms. And now, you're seeing the ghost of all that devotion, delicate, fragile, yet somehow stronger than the centuries that tried to erase it. Nearby, another archaeologist calls out excitedly from a pit. "I've found another one. I think it's a canine. Yes, still attached to a fragment of gold." Voices ripple with awe. They carefully lift the new piece from the soil and place it on a padded board. It's smaller than the first, but the gold loops are unmistakable. You can almost hear the tap-tap-tap of an ancient craftsman's hammer echo through the ground beneath your feet. Someone at the catalog table speaks softly. Every time we think we understand their techniques, something like this appears and proves there's still more to learn. Historians still debate whether these false teeth were widespread or limited to the elite. Whether they were ritual items or daily tools. Whether the Etruscans borrowed techniques from Greeks or invented them independently. And here, surrounded by the faint hum of modern machinery and the rustle of canvas tents, you hear the echoes of all those questions, still unanswered, still alive. But the more you watch, the more obvious it becomes that these artifacts aren't just archaeological curiosities. They're stories, they're identities, they're pieces of lives lived with intention. One archaeologist points at a particularly intricate piece. Look at this gold wire. It's too thin for structural support. This must have been purely decorative. Another nods. Aesthetic dentistry. In the 6th century BCE. Imagine that. You smile. You don't have to imagine it. You've lived it, at least in the quiet dream of this journey. The archaeologists continue documenting, photographing, and whispering to each other with a reverence that feels almost sacred. You notice their movements, slow, careful, like modern echoes of those artisans who once shaped these smiles by lamplight. It's quiet, thoughtful work that honors the past. You wander between the open pits, peering down at layers of earth peeled back like pages in a long-buried book. In one trench, you spot a jawbone with a thin glint of gold still hugging a tooth. It's fragile, barely there, a whisper of a whisper. But it has survived, through collapse, through decay, through centuries of silence. And for a moment, standing there in the moonlit excavation, you understand something that the Etruscans knew long before anyone wrote it down. Beauty endures. Craftsmanship endures. Identity endures. Not perfectly, not loudly, but in small, gleaming traces that refuse to vanish. As you step back from the site, the wind carries a soft rustle through the canvas tents, like distant voices murmuring through time. The gold glints one last time in the lamplight, and you feel the weight of everything you've witnessed begin to settle into you, a quiet, shimmering truth waiting to guide you into the final chapter. The excavation site slowly fades behind you as you step back into the quiet night. And the world shifts again, almost imperceptibly at first, like a dream softening around the edges. You're walking now through streets that feel both ancient and eternal, the kind that seem to hold memory in their stones. Torches flicker gently as the city exhales its last breaths of the day. And you feel drawn toward one final space, one last chapter waiting quietly, patiently, for you to enter. You follow a narrow path lined with cypress trees. And at the end of it rests a small terrace overlooking the valley. The moon hangs low, bright enough to reflect off distant rooftops and faint enough to let shadows settle comfortably around you. And there, sitting on a stone bench carved with spirals and vines, is an elderly woman. Her posture is straight, her hair is long and silver. And when she looks up at you, she smiles a smile unlike any you've seen so far. Not proud, not gilded, not performative, not decorative, just true. Her teeth are simple, one small gold band, One polished bone replacement, the rest her own, nothing extravagant, nothing meant to impress. It is a lived-in smile, softened by decades of laughter, sorrow, stories, and quiet resilience. She gestures for you to sit beside her. When you do, she speaks in a voice that feels like warm cloth. "You've seen much of us," she says gently. "The gold, the ivory, the rituals, the craftsmanship." You nod. "And you've seen our pride," she continues, "even our foolishness. Beauty can tempt the ego as easily as it comforts the heart." You nod again, thinking of the magistrate, the noblewoman, the decorative teeth meant only for festivals. "But you must understand something," she says, turning her gaze toward the moonlit valley. "The smile is not just adornment. It is the doorway of the self, a place where truth meets the world." She taps her jaw lightly. "Here is where we show fear. Here is where we show courage. Here is where we show kindness." You think of the workshops, the market, the rituals, the soldiers, the children, the laughter, and suddenly the pieces begin to weave together like threads of gold. She continues, her voice a soft hum. "A crafted tooth is not vanity. It is intention. It is a commitment to present the best version of oneself. Even when life chips at us." She turns to you. "And life will always chip at us." Her words settle over the terrace like dew. The wind shifts, bringing the faint scent of olives and distant hearth smoke. The woman closes her eyes for a moment, letting the night breathe around her. When she opens them again, she studies you with a gaze that feels older than the stones beneath your feet. "People think beauty is for the young," she says, "but beauty is for the living, for those who still greet the world each day." She smiles once more, not dazzling, not crafted for ceremony, but full, warm, and whole. You sit beside her in silence, watching her fingers trace the carved patterns on the bench. Slowly, she begins telling you stories, not of rituals or festivals, but of moments, small, human moments. The young girl who wore her first gold band and couldn't stop smiling for days. The toothless old man who laughed louder than anyone in the village. The woman who had her smile restored after an illness and said it felt like reclaiming her voice. The warrior who carried his fallen brother's decorative tooth as a token of memory. Moments that never made it into history books. Moments that shaped lives more deeply than rituals or politics ever could. "People will forget our kings," she murmurs. "They will forget our borders. But they will not forget how we loved beauty. How we shaped it, how we honored it. Even here," she taps her teeth, "in the small places." She stands slowly, joints creaking, and places a gentle hand on your shoulder. "You have walked with us," she says. "You have seen our truths. Take them with you." And then she steps away from the terrace, her figure fading into shadow as if she were never truly separate from it. You remain seated, watching the moon paint silver across the valley. The city sleeps, the air hums softly, and in that stillness, you feel the entire journey settle into you, not as information, but as an echo, a resonance. You understand now that the Etruscan smile wasn't about gold or ivory or status. It was about identity, expression, humanity, the quiet wish to be seen. And as the night deepens, the world around you begins to blur. the edges softening like smoke carried by a gentle wind. You rise slowly from the bench, stepping back into the quiet, letting the city fade around you like a dream made of lamplight and memory. And the story drifts toward its ending, warm, gentle, and full of the soft glow of the smiles that carried you here. End of script. Sweet dreams.